Hello, my name is Olusola Adebiyi, also known as Sola Story, and welcome to World Storytelling Cafe. So today I'm going to tell you a story or stories, and I hope that you enjoy it as this is my introduction to you. The story I'm going to tell you is called Duro, which in Yoruba means stay, and you'll see why. Before I do, I'm going to drum. I've got my djembe here. You can't see it because of the way the camera is set up, but you'll be able to hear it. And I hope that the sound travels clearly in this medium because sometimes it doesn't, but I like to drum just to introduce the energy of the story I'm about to tell. So, in a place far from here, but near to there, a lovely, beautiful valley held a town known as Duro. Duro was surrounded by a wide forest. Sweet rivers flowed along the beds around Duro, and the people were able to drink the water and bathe in the waterfall. Duro was a place of plenty, a place of peace, but it had a very unusual feature. You see, everybody that lived in Duro came from somewhere else. But once they came to Duro, they could never leave. And there was a good reason for this. You see, the forest that surrounded Duro was known as the Forbidden Forest. The reason for this being that whenever anyone entered that forest, the people in the village and the town would hear screams followed by roars and the sound of crunching bones. That was why no one could ever leave Duro. So to get out of Duro, one would have to pass through the Forbidden Forest. There were only two people who were actually born in Duro. Their names were Dame and Lolisa, and they were twins. Mao Longtooth, who was the first person to come to Duro, and therefore the oldest inhabitant there, told them in her usual storytelling manner that they were children of the stars. She related to them that on the day of their birth, a beautiful, queenly woman dressed in red had appeared in a cloud of red dust, a whirlwind of red dust, and had come to the children and whispered words in their ears. To Dame, she whispered the word, yo. Whereas to Lolisa, she whispered the word, yay. Then she said, these words will one day save your life. They are your words. And with that, she had disappeared again in a cloud of dust. Ma Longtooth spent much time with the children, and the children loved Ma Longtooth dearly, for she always put them in her stories and made them the heroes or the heroines of those stories. The children were much loved in Duro. They loved everybody. They had that kind of nature. And time passed. The children, of course, had heard the stories of the Forbidden Forest, but in their lifetime, no one had ever gone into the Forbidden Forest or been eaten. So, although they heard it, and although they feared the forest, they were also possessed of an really overwhelming sense of curiosity. And when they were teenagers, they made up their minds. The very next day, they were going to go into that forest. And the very next day, they did. They bid their parents farewell for the time being, and their parents called the chorus, the usual chorus of, "Listen, remember to eat your food at lunchtime. Do not go into the forbidden forest." And Dame and Lolisa smiled at each other after calling back, "Of course we won't." "But we will, won't we?" "Yes," said Dame, "but only to the boundary, not inside." And Lolisa said, "Of course now, we can't go inside, but we will go in the edge of the forest." And this they did. And they spent a really beautiful afternoon speaking poetry to each other, as was the wont of their people, and dancing and smiling and really enjoying the beautiful heady scent of the blue flowers that surrounded them. At lunchtime, they sat down and shared the meal that they had brought with them. And upon finishing the meal, they began to feel sleepy, and they slept. When they woke up, they were in the center of the forest. They had no idea how they had got there. Had they been moved or were still? Had the forest moved? They didn't know. They didn't have a clue, but what they did know was that they were terrified. Even more so when they began to hear a thunderous sound as of mighty feet charging in their direction, and they heard a roaring, and a gigantic grey beast burst into the clearing where they stood clutching each other in terror. And this beast was shaped like an elephant and grey like an elephant too, but instead of tusks, it had a mouth filled with dagger-like teeth. Its feet were endowed with huge sword-like claws, and this beast raised itself and reared and roared, "Children of Duro, I am Tokolosi. Why have you entered my forest? It is forbidden to you. Therefore, unless you can defeat me in combat, which you cannot, you must die." The children were so terrified they didn't know what to say, and they just remembered a word came from their hearts and into their mind, and Lolisa shouted, "Yay!" and Dame shouted, "Yo!" The two of them were carried in a whirlwind that had suddenly appeared away from the frustrated Tokoloshi and deposited on a plateau on a high mountain far away. They looked at each other, and then they saw that in front of them there was, seated on ebony thrones, a queenly woman in red and a kingly man in green. And the queenly woman said, "Children of Duro, why are you here? You have entered the forest that is forbidden. Why did you do that? Lolisa, uh, uh, Lolisa, tell them we just wanted to go on the edge. We didn't intend to go inside the forest. We don't know exactly how we got inside. That's right, said Lolisa. We have no idea. The kingly man in green said, well, since you have entered the forest, you now have to think carefully about what your next steps will be. You see, Tokoloshi, who you met, is a demon and has cast a spell on the forest, and a spell that encompasses Duro. Anytime anybody enters the forest, Tokoloshi is alerted and he comes for his meal. Children of Duro, you must think carefully about your next steps. Observe. And so saying, he held his palm open, and an image of them on the crossroads going in two directions was shown to them. On the left fork, they could see themselves escape from the forbidden forest and escape altogether from Duro and go out into the wide world and live happy lives, having children, getting married, having a wonderful life. But they would never see their parents again or anybody else from Duro. And the forecast for the people of Duro was grim, since it appeared that at some point, Tokoloshi would consume all of the people they knew. On the right fork, they saw themselves returning to Duro to face Tokoloshi, and they knew that that was an encounter that would probably result in their deaths. Dame looked at Lolisa. Lolisa looked at Dame. They decided that we have to do this. We cannot allow our people to die. We have to try. But they said to the queenly woman and the kingly man, how can we do this? We are just young. We don't have any skills. The queenly woman smiled at the kingly man and said, you have made the right choice, children of Duro. We are going to send you on an initiation. You will then be able to fight Tokoloshi. But let me tell you a little bit about the way to defeat Tokoloshi. Look yonder. And the children looked, and they saw Duro somewhere on the edge of the forest. And in the direct center of the forest, they saw a silvery, mystical pool gleaming with a strange fey inner light. That, said the woman, is the pool of Miomo. It is the only way to defeat Tokoloshi. You must get him to look at his own reflection in that pool, and then he is finished. But he knows this and will never willingly look in that pool. So, the other thing you should know is Tokoloshi's main weakness is pride. So, said the kingly man, knowing this, I therefore send you on your journey. And the man and the woman gathered red and green powder and they threw it in a cloud above Dame and Lolisa, and they were immediately transported into another land. Dame landed in a strange land surrounded by golden barked trees. And in this land, he was given a strange task. A series of men surrounded him in a circle. All of them were chanting, yo, 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 yo. And they were dancing the dance of Abet, the praying mantis. And they danced and they danced and they danced. And as they danced, Dame felt a strange dislocation, a strange sense of disembodiment, as though he was rising out of his body and yet could still see his body, also dancing the dance of Abet, the praying mantis. And they danced in a circle, and their movements turned into combat, and they began to fight in the praying mantis style. They hit and they kicked and they leapt mighty leaps, leaps that Dame did not even know that he was capable of. And as they moved, Dame began to feel a numinous sense of belonging to something greater than himself. And as he felt this sense, he also felt a rising of energy from his core up through his spine and the front of his body and into his head, expanding his mind so that he felt and saw the universe and was indeed part of the universe. And it came back together, coalesced into a strange power in the center of his being. And May pulled back his hand and he shouted, yo! And as he shouted, yo, a blast of energy shot forth from his hand and smashed into a wall far away that had been erected for the purpose, disintegrating it on contact. Lolisa also landed in a forest of silver-barked trees, surrounded by a group of graceful women dancing the dance of Nyoka, the serpent dance. And as they danced, they spun around Lolisa until Lolisa herself was compelled to dance the dance of the Nyoka. And as she danced the dance of the Nyoka, she felt a strange sense of disembodiment, a strange sense, a numinous sense of belonging to something greater than herself. And she felt and saw the energy lines in the earth leading through galactic synapses across planets and stars and galaxies. And she felt as though she observed a mighty, mighty presence as she danced the dance of the Nyoka, singing, Nyoka, 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 yeah. She felt as though she was seen and witnessed, and she traveled back across the galactic synapses of the universes, back through the ley lines, the dragon lines of the earth, and back into her body. And her mind expanded, and she knew that she had the power of manifestation and the power of illusion. The two young people stayed in their respective places for a while, dancing their dances, until they were released by the women and the men back to the plateau on top of the mountain in front of the kingly woman, the kingly man, and the queenly woman. You look different, said the kingly man. Yes, smiled the queenly woman. Now you have everything that you need to defeat Tokoloshi. All you need now is a plan. Blowing the red and green dust, the women and the men were carried away in a whirlwind down, down, down into the forest. When they arrived in the forest, Lolisa whispered to Dame, "This is what we will do. We are going to defeat Tokoloshi with cunning and a combination of our powers. When I call you, you will come and you will punch Tokoloshi in his forehead. I will give you a seeming, so he will not know who you are, but will think that you are a beast like him. I will create the illusion that will fool him. So, Dame, go now, please." And Dame ran into the forest after smiling at Lolisa. The two young people, although they were still frightened, were no longer overwhelmed by fear. And this was very important. Then Lolisa shouted, "Tokoloshi! Tokoloshi! Come! You have been challenged!" Shortly after she said this, she heard the thundering of feet and the roaring sound, showing that Tokoloshi was arriving. And Tokoloshi burst once again into the clearing, shattering a tree on contact, and roared, "Challenge you? How can you challenge me?" "It's not me. It's not me. Oh. It's the other beast that looks like you, the other kind of Tokoloshi. It said that it can beat you, it will eat you, that you are nothing to it, that you are less than a mouse to it." Tokoloshi's pride was aroused, and he said, "Another monster like me, and you call me monster, but there is another one like me. Where is he? I will defeat him." As he said this, Lolisa called, "Tokoloshi too!" And Tokoloshi, or an appearance of Tokoloshi, came into the clearing, looking just like him, and rushed up to him and bit him on the shoulder and smashed him in the head. And Tokoloshi staggered back in pain, not knowing that he had not been bitten or headbutted. He had actually been punched by Dame, who had used his mighty energy. As he staggered back in fear and surprise, a conversion happened in his mind, and Tokoloshi changed from fear and surprise into rage and desire for vengeance. Tokoloshi leapt forward, but as he leapt forward, Dame turned round and ran towards a door that had suddenly appeared and was now closing. Lolisa smiled as Tokoloshi chased Dame towards this door, and Dame disappeared behind the door. Tokoloshi ran because he could see clearly that that door was a magic door, and he knew that if that door closed, the beast that had disappeared in through the door would be forever lost to him. So Tokoloshi stretched and ran and sped until he dived through the door, which was nearly closing, and he growled in triumph and looked down, and what he saw below him caused his tongue to cleave to his palate, his heart to drop into his feet, his stomach to turn to water. For directly below him was the pool of Niyomo, and the door was placed on the very edge of a cliff, and Tokoloshi found himself falling into the pool of Miomo, looking at his own reflection. He screamed in horror and disappeared into the pool without a trace. Gamea Lolisa floated gently down in a spiral into the cool, reflecting waters of the mystical pool. And they walked through the pool that only came up to their bellies, and to the other side where the forbidden forest in the direction of their home, Duro, was. And as they walked through the forest, they saw that everything had changed. The trees that were once tight knit were now separating, and pathways were appearing with sunlight dappling the leaves and shadowing on the ground. It was clear that the spell had been broken, and they saw coming towards them the mystified people of Duro, looking around themselves in wonderment at this transformed environment. And they saw Dame and Lolisa walking towards them. And their mystification increased because Dame and Lolisa, they looked completely different. In fact, Lolisa looked like the queenly woman in red. Dame looked like the kingly man in green. And that is because that is exactly who they were. The end. So that story has a significance. First of all, it's about our true selves and our potential. Who are we? What can we truly achieve if we know ourselves? Dame and Lolisa had to go through a rites of passage, an initiation which in the ancient world and certainly in the African world was ubiquitous for all young people when they reached a certain age. They would have to learn how to become men and women in the context of their culture. In the present day, this also happens. There are many organizations in the UK even, such as Journeymen, Band of Brothers, Mankind, Womankind Project, there's Journey Woman too. There are lots of, I think there's one, Be With Woman. So they exist. But the main point is that we as individuals go through a spiritual journey. We grow up, we encounter the material world, we listen to our parents, or we don't listen to our parents, but we learn lessons as we go. And those of us that have the wisdom to inculcate and incorporate those lessons begin to grow, not only physically, but also mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, which in this time of the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd, this time of demonstrations around Black Lives Matters and people becoming activated to an awareness of white supremacy, white fragility, and the need to change those things. This story demonstrates that A, we have a twin nature. And in this story, the twins were both striving for excellence. But our twin nature can also lead us in opposite directions. We can cleave both to the benevolent and the malevolent. The choice is always ours. But what is very clear is that within us all, on the day we are born, lies coiled the fulfillment of our potential, just as an oak tree lies coiled within an acorn. That is the potential. So the kingly man and the queenly woman were the potential future selves of Dame and Lolisa. But those are future selves that they would have never reached had they taken the other pathway. It's similar to the blue and the red pill in Matrix. One pill allows us to be just how we were. Happy, yes. Complacent, fulfilled, maybe. But not the sublime fulfillment of achieving our full potential. And that, fortunately for us, is a choice that we can make every day. We don't have to face those type of monsters, even though the monsters in our own lives are real. They are things like doubts, especially self-doubt, fear. Some of us have been aggressed upon, abused, particularly under the system of white supremacy. I would say that every Black person has been aggressed upon or abused systemically, at least. But many of us have been abused in different ways. Women have been abused systemically by patriarchy, and individuals have been abused by their families, physically, emotionally, mentally, in different ways. Those are the monsters. But can we overcome those monsters? Yes, we can. We have that potential. And that potential lies within us and is in our breath and is in our intention and is in understanding that we can emancipate ourselves from the emotional slavery of self-doubt, inferiority complexes, a belief in our ugliness and our inability to do what is necessary, from envy, from jealousy. All of those are the teeth and claws of the monster that actually lies within us. But the good thing is that so does the king or the queen that has power over our environments. So that is a story for our times. The story of Duro, Hashima, and thank you. I'm just looking to see what the timing is, to see whether I should tell you another story, to see how long this story has actually been. It doesn't say. I'm going to tell you a quick story anyway, regardless of how long the story is. So, in a place far from here, but near to there was a queen. She was distraught. Her son had died, and she was beside herself with grief. So overwhelmed by this emotion was she, that she could not bury her son. In fact, she commanded that nobody dare to bury her son. She called the wise women and men of the country to come and bring her son back to life and promised them her kingdom if they could so do. Of course, they could not. And they came one after the other and tried all types of things, magic and psychology and physiology and all kinds of things, herbs of strange and mysterious kinds. But none of them could bring this young man back to life. And so finally, an elder woman from another land came. And she said, "Your Majesty, I can help. I can help if you will do what I say." "Of course I'll do what you say. Just tell me what you need me to do. I will do it." "Go into your city and bring me the anointing oil that people use. Knock on their doors and ask them for that anointing oil." The queen did not need to be told twice. She was off and out into the city. She knocked on the first door. When the people saw her, they bowed. Your Majesty, what can we do for you? I just need your anointing oil. That's it. Your Majesty, we would love to help you. We would do anything for you, my queen, but we cannot give you the anointing oil. We just used it this morning because our grandfather died this very day. Oh, said the queen, and she ran to the next door, whereupon she knocked, and the door opened. And again, the people bowed. Your Majesty, what can we do for you? I just need the anointing oil. Their faces dropped. Your Majesty, we cannot give it to you because my sister just died. She went to the next door and was met with a similar response. And from door to door, she traveled across the length and breadth of the city around its environment. And in every household she came to, she heard the same story. And she began to realize that her grief was no more special than anybody else's grief. That her grief was something that was natural and was experienced by all of her subjects, and therefore by all humans. And so she went back to the old woman, and she bowed to the elder woman and said, thank you. You have helped me to understand the truth of my own selfish desire and the reality that grief is a cleansing force and not to be avoided, and death is imminent. The elder woman said, yes, Your Majesty, you have learned well, but I do not want your kingdom. Your understanding is enough payment for me. The end. So people, my name is Sola Story. And it has been a real pleasure to converse with you. I've really enjoyed this time. I wish that I could see you and that we could interact, but I hope that you enjoy the stories and that you will invite me back to tell more. Thank you so much. Heshima means respect in the language of Swahili. So, Heshima.
Did you enjoy that storyteller? Of course you did. And if you enjoyed it, like the minstrels of old, we're passing round the hat. And if you have some, whether it's paper or coin, our storytellers would appreciate what you put in. Every penny you put in goes directly to that storyteller through paper. All you have to do is go to worldstorytellingcafe.com. Click on today's stories or click on that storyteller, and there'll be a hat below the story. And you can just drop a little in that hat. Well, thank you for listening. And if you can afford it, we'd appreciate it.